Hi and welcome back. Today I'm going to be painting a very simplified version of this photograph that I found on Pixabay. I shall leave the link to the photograph in the description below. But what I'm going to be doing is painting it as a tonal study, so concentrating on value rather than colour. And it's for this reason that I've chosen a black and white photograph. It kind of helps show us where the values are. I shall use my artistic license to really simplify the photograph and just to try and pick out the main tones, but in a way that kind of really adds impact and shape to my painting. I think sometimes beginners can get a little bit stuck sort of thinking in terms of only using sort of naturalistic colours or trying to slavishly copy a photograph and get the colours right. And that can lead to forgetting about the tones. And I think very often if you're just starting out, it can be really helpful to do something like this, or maybe a smaller version than the one that I'm doing, which is like a tonal value study. And it can really show you where your darks and lights need to be. It can help you to really crystallize ideas for your composition, so that then when you go into a full color painting, you've more or less got a roadmap pretty much for your tonal values, your lights and darks, and the finer points of your composition. So today I'm using sepia and indigo to explore the tonal range that I want to get in this painting. My first step before painting, though, was to simplify the photograph and just to sketch out the very basic shape of the trawler boat in its sort of dry dock, with a couple of ladders, a bit of scaffolding and just a hint of a sort of background, making sure I got the perspective right, and that will help me to get a sort of a more dynamic look to the painting, etc, etc. So what I've done is I've wet my paper mostly all over. I've left the ship dry and left some dry patches in the foreground at slight angles following my perspective, so that when I come to apply my very thick, rich indigo and sepia in sweeps across the painting, then I can avoid the ship, and the wet in wet paint will diffuse around the ship because it'll flow round past the dry areas of the painting and just stay with the water. I can tip and tilt my board if I need to, and then I can also mop up any pools of water that kind of are running down the page, because my board is at an angle of about 45 degrees, so I can just dry that up so I don't get any spillages of paint running down into my boat. I think it's a little trawler. It's quite a nice shape, and it's amazing how large the hull looks when the whole thing's out of the water. So what I've mostly got here is mid-tones. That's what I'm doing at the moment. I'm thinking of my mid-tones and getting this sort of gradated wash across the whole page, wet in wet, but leaving my pale areas white. The white of the paper, so that's dry and unpainted. I'm being really careful to leave those. You can of course add those afterwards with white gouache, but it can be a lot harder to do that. And now here are my darks. This is a quick tonal sketch. I'm not being too fussy about them being exact. I just want them in the right place, and sort of to really help to make the shape, the roundness of the hull pop, using the darks and lights and making sure that I'm counter-changing or contrasting my dark paint against light areas. As the paint rundowns, it's beginning to seep a little bit into the cabin, which I want to keep white, the white of the paper. So I'm using a piece of tissue here and there just to clean that out. Now this is a plastic card, and I'm using a store card. I'm using it to just scrape in something in nothing bits of detail across the base of the contraption that's holding the boat upright. on the side of the harbour while work's being done on it. Sort of a trailer, I think. I can see a few wheels, things like that. So I'm putting in sort of infrastructure, something and nothing, bits of repairing equipment and anything like that across the base. But I'm keeping it dark. That's the important thing. There's bits of light being pulled out and kept, but mostly it's dark in shadow, in the shadow of the hull of the fishing boat. But I'm also making sure that there is a sort of linkage with my dark, that it runs across the entire painting, sort of meeting up so that there's some kind of a unity or harmony to the darks across the painting. And now I'm going to just flick a little bit of water into the ground just to add a bit of texture, a few blossoms and a little bit of interest to it. And I'm going to leave it to dry completely and come back and finish it off with a bit of detail. So here it is, completely dry, and as you can see, because I've focused on value, i.e. the lights and the darks and the midtones, I don't need to do too much. Most of my structure is there. I just need to tidy up some of the darks and add a few more dark areas. So I'm just coming down with the flat brush to darken up the area underneath the hull at the back of the boat, which I'm assuming is sort of part of its big keel or something like that. Again, I can't see too clearly in the photograph, so I'm not worrying about the details too much. I'm just making sure if I get the right tones at the back of the boat underneath, then it should work okay. If you get the right tones in your painting, then the rest will follow. Sometimes it's difficult to tell with colour what your tones are like. So if you've got a colour photograph, it can be a really good idea to put it into a phone editing suite or a computer editing suite and turn it into a black and white photograph. And straight away you'll really see clearly where the darks and the lights are. And then you can then adjust and use your colour accordingly. But doing a tonal study like this can really teach you a lot about value, counterchange, lights against darks, and how effective shadows can be. And then once you've got this kind of roadmap, then you can move forward. And if you choose to, then you can paint a colour version, having already worked out all your tones beforehand. But I often just prefer to work in tones. I'm not too bothered by colour. I might add a few colour pops, but I prefer to use colours that sort of sing to me, and those are mostly the earthy shades. Like I love indigo and sepia. It's my absolute favourite colour combination, and it's working really nicely here. The black, blue and the black brown hues of those two colours are really bringing the tones out and really helping to make this tonal study work in quite a dynamic way. Now I'm using the edge of my plastic store card here, which I've dipped into paint to sort of print this sort of little movable scaffolding platform that's on the side, by the side of the boat. Which would be quite a tricky thing to paint otherwise. But if I can get some marks down, little thin ones, straight ones first, using the side of the card and just printing those marks on, then I can continue and then put in the sort of struts and details, the little platform where the workers would sit or stand to carry out the repairs or the maintenance or the painting of the hull. So let me know what you think in the comments. What do you think? Do you think colour is more important than tone, or tonal value is more important than colour? Or do you think the two are equally as important as each other in watercolour painting? I'll be really interested to see what you think. Of course, there's no wrong or right answer. We're all right in some way or another, whatever our opinion. It's just that we have different preferences. and I have a preference, a very strong preference for tone. For me, that's the number one important thing in thinking about composition. Everything else will fall into place if the tonal values are right. I mean, obviously there are other considerations like a balanced composition and things like that. But I think when you're working out tonal values with tonal sketches, that can help you to see whether or not your composition is going to work, because the lights, midtones and darks are such an important part of a watercolour painting that they can sort of throw off what seems like a really nice composition just out of balance, if it's not quite right. And as soon as you start doing these tonal studies, you can think to yourself, now I need to shift my boat slightly towards the left, or I need to bring it further down the page, or I need something else on the right to balance up with the shapes on the left, all that sort of thing. So doing tone studies can really help with all kinds of parts of your painting and not just value. And of course, you don't have to use sepia and indigo like this for a tonal study. Payne's grey is really good, and burnt umber is a really good colour to use, because both of those colours will give you a good range from dark to light to be able to use in your paintings. But you can also do tonal value studies in sketchbooks just using fine liners and brush pens, that sort of thing. So you can keep them really, really simple and just block in the darks and hatch the midtones and leave the white of the paper white. And that way you can do quite a few little thumbnail sketches if you're working through ideas for your composition. So there's many, many ways of using value studies. Not just painting them like this, but I think this can be really useful, because what I'm doing really is, as I said before, creating a roadmap for a more detailed full colour painting if I choose to do one at some point. All I need to do is get out this tone study and have a look at it and really sort of work on a more detailed painting using all the information that I've gathered and put together here for this in this painting. So I'm just moving towards the end stages of this painting. I've got a few details that I'm putting in, just using the tips of the flat brush to rough in a sort of suggestion of a rail across the front and the back. A little bit of detail for the windows of the cabins, not too much, just a suggestion of that. Just to sort of bring the painting together a little bit more. And then a sweep of dark paint using the Harkey brush across the foreground to put in a bit of extra shadow across the ground. And I think this just balances up the composition and sort of anchors it at the base of the painting a little bit more. And an added bonus of this is that because of the transparent nature of watercolour, you can still see some of the previous brushwork underneath that shadow. So it looks as if the shadow is cast across the ground. So here you can see I've removed the tape, and I'm having a quick look at the painting. Without the tape and with a clean white border, I can see whether or not I think it needs anything added to it. And I think there's a few things I need to just adjust. I need to put some shadow across the left side of the cabin in places. And I've decided to, with my fine calligraphy brush, put in just a couple of ropes hanging off the side of the boat at the back. And that little extra detail, I think, would just add enough to it. I've also used a white gel pen to put a few highlights on the ladder on the right. And then the white gel pen highlights on the rope against the darker parts really work to counterchange with the rope, light against dark. And just that simple addition of the rope, I really think adds just enough detail to this painting. Just a bit more shadow to bed in the ropes into the ground below the boat. And then finally, I think just a bit of something and nothing, maybe a hatch or a few bits and bobs on top of that roof. And the dark paint there, even though there's nothing much there, again, it counterchanges with the unpainted cabin, just to draw attention to it a little bit more. So that's the finished tonal study, and I'm quite pleased with it. I've certainly got enough information here to go further and do a full colour painting if I choose to. So I hope that was useful. Let me know what you think in the comments, and please leave us a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And if you click on the bell, you'll be notified whenever I post another video, which is 2 or 3 times a week. Thanks so much for watching, and thank you so much to my lovely Patreon group who support this channel. And I'll see you again soon, and happy painting. Bye.